Okay.
Mm.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining today's presentation on how to submit an error-free military service deposit package. Let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Tammy Piol, and I work for the Department of the Navy Civilian Benefits Center, where we process military deposits and submit them to DFAS. I wanted to quickly go over a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Throughout the slideshow, if you have questions, please ask them in the chat. We do have moderators in the chat that will be answering questions as we go. We will also have a few stopping points built in to allow for a 2 to 3 minute pause to provide an opportunity for our moderators to answer any lingering questions before we move on to the next section. And during that time, if you don't have any questions, feel free to use that break to grab something to drink, to take a bathroom break, or stretch your legs, whatever you need. And also at the end of the presentation, there will be a final opportunity for people to ask questions as well. Okay, with that said, let's go ahead and get started. Okay. So for the goal today is to provide you all the information you need to submit and complete a military service deposit to avoid any delays in having it processed. Next slide, please. Today, we will go through the military service deposit process from A to Z in order to provide you with everything that you need to know to make submitting your military deposit go as smooth as possible. We're going to be covering the basics of what a military deposit is, what are the benefits of completing a military deposit, what forms and supporting documentation are required to submit a complete military deposit package. We'll also discuss common errors we see at the CBC, which is the Civilian Benefits Center, when we're reviewing packages. And at the end of this, you will know who is responsible for what at the different steps of the process. So first and foremost, what is a military service deposit? Okay. Military service deposit, and what does it mean to buy back your military time? You may have heard that phrase. I'm not sure if some of you were like me when you first started federal service and had no clue what it was, but when I found out, I was definitely pleasantly surprised, and I jumped at that opportunity to complete my own military deposit right away. Okay. So a military deposit is a payment federal civilian employees are allowed to make to apply credible credible military time towards your civilian retirement fund to be used towards retirement eligibility and annuity computations. We will discuss what military service is eligible and what is not in the upcoming slides. Okay. So how much will your military deposit be if you decide to complete a military deposit? If you're covered under the FERS retirement plan, it will be 3% I will be 3% of your basic military pay you received while you were in the military. And if you're covered under the CSRS retirement plan, it will be 7% of your basic pay that you received, military pay that you received, as well as any interest that may have accrued. Okay, when we mention interest accrual, an important thing to be aware of is that you're actually given a 2-year interest-free grace period on deposits, beginning when you start your federal service career. After 2 years, your interest begins to accrue annually, and you'll start to get charged at your 3rd year, basically your anniversary with federal service. So you actually end up getting a 3-year interest-free period. So for example, Mr. John Doe began his federal service this year on January 1st, 2023. If he pays his military deposit in full by January 1st, 2026, He will only pay the deposit amount and he will not be charged any interest. But keep in mind, if it's not paid in full by that 3rd-year mark, your interest will accrue annually until it is paid off. I point this out because I've seen a lot of times where people do not submit their military deposit until the end of their career and they're about to retire and they have 20 or 30 plus years with federal service by that time. So the interest can really add up to thousands of dollars. So if you do decide that you want to buy back your military time or create or do that military deposit from a financial standpoint, the sooner you can do so and pay it in full, the better. Next slide, please. So what is USERRA and how does it pertain to military deposits? USERRA is the Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act. USERRA protects military members and veterans from employment discrimination resulting from their service in the military and allows them to return to their civilian jobs following a period of uniform service. So for military deposit purposes, periods covered under USERRA are calculated a bit different than typical military deposits. The amount of deposit before interest is limited to either a percentage of the military base pay received or a percentage of what the civilian earnings would have been. The lesser of the two is the amount that the employee pays. Next slide, please. The following military service that you see on the slide is what is eligible for to buy back. So non-retired military, this service must be active and honorable. Active duty performed under Title 10, which terminated under honorable conditions. Graduates from the military service academies can buy back their academy time. Sometimes we see people that retired from the military and they don't want to buy back all of their military time, but they just end up buying back their academy time, which is allowed. Retired military with a waiver of military retired pay. Reserves, National Guard, military service performed after December 31st, 1956, Peace Corps, Public Health Service, and again, the USERRA periods where civilian employees are activated, causing a break in their civilian service. Next slide, please. Okay. The types of military service not eligible for buyback: dishonorable discharge, other than honorable, clemency discharge, neutral or uncharacterized discharge, or officer dismissals. Those would not be eligible to complete a military deposit for. You would not be able to buy back those times. Next slide, please. Here we have the rules and regulations that we follow in regards to military deposit. There are public laws in place. There's the Code of Federal Regulations that we follow and other public laws specifically pertaining to USERRA. Next slide. Okay. So what are the benefits of paying a military deposit? What's so great about this military deposit, right? Okay. The bottom line is that once that deposit is paid in full, your military time can be added to your federal service time, allowing you to retire earlier and increase your FERS retirement pension. So under the FERS retirement system, you must meet one of the following to qualify for an immediate unreduced retirement. So again, we're only talking about an immediate unreduced FERS retirement right now. And you should, you meet the minimum retirement age with 30 years of service. The minimum retirement age can range from age 55 to 57, depending when you were born. You are at age 60 with 20 years of service, or you are at age 62 with at least 5 years of service. Next slide, please. Okay. So how can making a military deposit potentially allow you to retire earlier? Okay, this is a great example. So let's say you have a minimum retirement age yours is 57 years old, and you have 20 years of civilian service, and you bought back your 10 years of military service. This now brings your total credible service time to 30 years. And now you can retire at age 57 instead of waiting until you're 60. This example shows how making a military deposit can affect your retirement annuity or pension. Your total years of credible service are used in the calculation of your first pension. So you take your years of credible service and multiply that by your high three salary. Your high three is the highest average basic pay you earned during any 3 consecutive years of federal service. And then you multiply that by your multiplier. And we'll discuss what the multiplier is on the next screen. Okay. So as a traditional FERS employees, we're not talking about any special provisions. Your multiplier will always be 1% unless you are at least age 62. When you retire with at least 20 years of service, at which point then your multiplier will be 1.1%. Next slide, please. In this example, the person has 20 years of service multiplied by the high three salary of $100,000. This is multiplied by 1%, and this calculates to the employee's gross annual pension being $20,000. So to find the monthly annuity, you would divide that amount by 12 because there are 12 months in a year. And the gross monthly pension amount is $1,666. Now, keep in mind, this is the gross amount and does not include deductions that come out of your pension for things like life insurance, health benefits, and other things that may come out of your pension. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now let's look at the exact same scenario, except this time the employee has bought back their 10 years of military service. And now those 10 years are included in the calculation of their pension. So by buying back that time, their annual gross pension has now increased by $10,000 per year. So not a bad deal. Next slide, please. At this point, we will take a quick 2-minute break for the moderators to continue answering any questions in the chat people may have up to this point, and to allow you to grab something to drink or anything if you need. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. So far, we have discussed what a military deposit is and what the benefits of buying back your military time are. Now let's talk about what do you need in order to submit your military deposit. So our goal at the CBC is for everyone to submit a complete and accurate military deposit package. So there are no delays in certifying your deposit on our end and submitting it to DFAS. Every military deposit package should have the following three things: the correct application, proof of your military service for every period that you're requesting to buy back, and the estimated earnings statement. Next slide, please. Okay, so employees covered under FERS are required to submit the SF 3108 and the SF 3108A. And employees covered under CSRS must use the SF 2803 and SF 2803A. In the past, there was a CBC form that was used, but that is no longer accepted. DFAS will only accept the forms shown here for your application. This is a fairly new update within the last few months. So if your command has the old form or you find the old form online somewhere, please do not use it because your package will not be processed without the correct applications. This is an example of what the SF 3108 looks like. And again, this is the form used by FERS employees. Um, you are responsible for completing boxes 1 through 16 on this page. That middle section that asks for all of your periods of civilian service does not need to be completed. You can leave that blank. Very important in box 13, where your signature is required, you will need to sign with either a wet signature or your CAC. Do not use the computer generated signatures. DFAS will not accept that and it will be returned. And this is the application that goes along with it, the SF 3108A. And the employee will complete the top portion with your name, date of birth, social security number, and box 1 on the left-hand side. That portion that's on the right-hand side is what the CBC will complete when we certify your application. And again, that bottom portion with the signature block, please ensure that you are either signing that with a wet signature or using your CAC. Again, the computer generated signature will not be accepted. And if somebody happens to process your application and they miss that, DFAS will probably catch it and kick it back as well. So very important. Here's the list of acceptable proof of service documents that will need to be submitted with your package. And we'll go into detail each of these in the next few slides. Typically, the most common used document is the DD-214. And the important thing to be aware of when you're submitting that DD-214 is that it has to be the member copy 4 or service copy 2. And what makes it different, those copies different, is it shows character of service and dates of time lost during that period. And that is a requirement from DFAS to have that. Um, Sometimes DD-214s may not be issued, especially maybe during a USERRA period that's brief, and therefore military orders are accepted as well. SF-50s are required for USERRA periods as far as your LWOP SF-50 and your return to duty SF-50. Next slide, please. So when reviewing your DD-214, prior to submitting your package, make sure that the entrance and separation dates match your estimated dates, estimated earnings dates exactly. If it's 1 day off, the estimated earnings will need to be corrected. I know it seems very picky, but It is very picky. Those have to be matched perfectly. As I mentioned earlier, the copy you submit must reflect that box 24 at the bottom for character of service, as well as box 29 that shows dates of time lost during this period. If it does not include this information, that DD 214 will not be accepted. If you have military academy time and you're providing an academy letter as your proof of service, make sure it shows the actual dates you were at the academy and when your active duty started. Ask the academy to include your estimated earnings in the letter. Normally, they already do this, but if you see it's missing, you can follow up with them and ask them to include that information as well. So this is an example of a statement of service. If you do submit a statement of service, please ensure that it has your entrance and separation dates, character of service, and it addresses time lost for every period of service. Also very important, if you have several periods of service, like in this example, you'll need to include each period on your application. Sometimes people will just put their very first date and the very last date. You will need to list each period, and sometimes this may require several applications to do so. If you have a lot of periods that you want to buy back, which is fine, but they do have to all be listed. Each period has to be listed on its own line, basically, on the application. So for USERA, we did mention earlier that SF50s will be required. This is an example of an SF50 showing that this person went out on military LWOP, and this will need to be included. And you are able to access these in your EOPF. And this is just the return to duty SF50. And again, this will be in your EOPF as well. And again, this is only for periods covered under USERA that this is required. So estimated earnings. The RI 2097 is the application form to obtain your estimated earnings, and it must be completed by you, the employee, and you will send it to your branch of service. Uh, the contact information as far as where it should be sent is on page 2 of the RI 2097. A big thing that we see at the CBC are that employees submit their RI 2097 to us, but we do not provide estimated earnings. So you will have to request that from your appropriate military finance center prior to submitting your package to the Civilian Benefits Center. If you do have a USERA period, please contact the benefits line for counseling prior to submitting your RI 2097. USERA estimated earnings are calculated different, and those LWOP and return to duty SF50s are needed to prepare the estimated earnings. This is an example of what the estimated earnings will look like. This is what you'll receive in the mail. Remember, the DD 214 dates and the estimated earning dates must match exactly. The exception to that would be if it's a USERA period. The estimated earnings will show if there are any lost periods reflected on the DD 214 as well. Sometimes you do everything correctly on your end and somebody just does a typo and they may not get the dates right on the estimated earnings. So it's very important when you receive the estimated earnings statement back that you compare those dates with your DD 214 dates and make sure that it's correct. If it's not, it will need to be corrected. Okay. And this is the RI 2097 form that we discussed earlier. And this is what you submit in order to obtain your estimated earnings. When you submit this form, you will need to also attach the document you're using for proof of your military service. So whether that be your statement of service, DD 214, military orders, it will need to be attached to this application when submitting this to get your estimated earnings. This is the second page of that RI 2097 that provides you the contact information for your appropriate military finance center. So this is where you'll be sending the RI 2097 once you've completed it along with your proof of service. There is also information provided on this form on how to obtain your DD 214 if you've lost your copy or you don't have one and you need to get one. Okay. Great. So again, we'll take a quick, 2 to 3 minute break for the moderators to continue answering any questions in the chat that come up. And again, feel free to, grab something to drink. Welcome back. We will now move forward with providing you the information on how to obtain everything you need for your military deposit package. So you can actually go to the OPM website to find your appropriate application. And again, if you're a FERS employee, which means you're in the FERS retirement plan. You're going to need that SF 3108 and SF 3108A. And if you are under the CSRS retirement plan, you will need the SF 2803 and the SF 2803A, both. Um, Feel free to take a screenshot of this information if you need to on ways to obtain your DD 214. And if after this presentation, please remember that if you have any questions regarding the military deposit process or where to get forms needed, please contact the benefits line and they will assist you, or they will create a ticket for a HR technician at the CBC to answer any questions you have and provide any forms you need as well. So there's definitely ways to get all of the information that you need if at some point you can't remember from all of this information. If you will be using an academy letter, you'll need to contact your academy registrar's office in order to obtain that. A statement of service, if you have that statement of service that we showed earlier, please make sure that it shows all services active duty under Title 10. The service has been verified as honorable service, and it must be completed exactly in the manner presented on the AF Form 1613. Okay. And again, USERRA periods do require the SF50s as well. So when you went on leave without pay for your military and your return to duty SF50, as well as any pay changes that happen during that LWOP period. And again, you can obtain these from your EOPF, the electronic official personnel folder. The RI 2097, which is the estimated earnings application, can be found on the OPM website. Remember to also include your proof of service when submitting the RI 2097 to your Military Finance Center. And again, if this is a USERRA period, you'll need to submit those SF50s as well. Again, we'll take a very quick 2-minute break for the moderators to continue answering questions in the chat. Welcome back. Now we are going to go over the most common errors we see when employees are submitting their military service deposits to the Civilian Benefits Center. Okay. A big one is missing signature on the applications. Either it's missing completely, or maybe they sign one application, they don't sign the other, or they use that computer generated signature, which isn't allowed. So make sure both applications have your signature, the wet signature or CAC, um, and that both are completed. Um, Also, if you have more than one DD-214 with no break-in service, you must buy back the entire period of service. You can't choose to only buy back one of the DD-214 periods. Um, that's if there is no break-in service and there's two DD-214s that are consecutive. You have to buy back the entire period. Okay. Another big one is the service dates do not match across the board. Basically, it will be the DD-214 dates are not matching the estimated earning dates. Um, Again, those should match exactly unless it is a USERA period. Proof of service does not reflect the character of service or the time loss. So they're providing maybe the wrong DD-214, or their statement of service doesn't address the character of service and time loss. Another one that we've seen is the DD-214 altered in shaded areas, making the document unacceptable. The RI 2097 a lot of times will be submitted directly to the Civilian Benefits Center instead of the appropriate Military Finance Center. So just be aware when you're submitting your military deposit, you must have already requested your estimated earnings and received those, and you're giving us the estimated earnings and not that RI 2097 request for the estimated earnings. Another one is the time on your DD-214 does not match your service as far as the years, months, days are not adding up. Okay. Also, employees submitting applications with missing applicant data, such as service dates, branch of service, demographic information. The estimated earnings statement may not reflect lost time, but the DD-214 shows that there is a period of lost time. That would have to be the estimated earnings would need to be corrected in that instance. Um, and the application and estimated earning dates, again, do not match except for USERA, because the estimated earnings statement is based on DD-214 service dates only. So you've done everything at this point, and now it's time to submit your error-free military deposit package to the Civilian Benefits Center. What happens now? Okay, so please just review your package one last time prior to submitting it to the CBC. Ensure that you do have the proper proof of service that match your buyback dates. Ensure that you submit and receive your estimated earnings statement prior to submitting your application package. And if you do have multiple DD-214s without a break-in service, again, you must make a deposit for the entire period and submit all of the DD-214s. Okay. When we receive military service deposit packages with missing documents, it is considered incomplete and they will not be processed. When we get an incomplete military deposit package, a benefits counselor will return your application package to you with the information on how to obtain the missing documents, and then you can resubmit at a later date once you have all of the necessary documents. So when filling out your application, make sure that you fill out the right application. If you're a FERS employee, make sure that you're filling out that FERS application, which is the 3108. And if you're a SERS employee, make sure you're filling out that 2803 and 2803A. Also, make sure your dates are accurate and match your other documents. Again, compare the dates on the DD 214 with those estimated earnings. That's just a big one that we see often. If you have proof of service on hand, so your DD 214 statement of service, then review it to make sure that your dates of service match the dates on your application. They match your DD 214, the total amount of time matches your service completed as far as the years, months, and days of how long you were in service. If you do not have your proof of service on hand, and you'll need to obtain documents prior to sending your package to the CBC. DD 214 request can take up to 6 months. Always request the member copy 4 or service copy 2, which shows that character of service and any time lost, because that will be the only copies that we will be able to process for your military deposit if you're submitting DD 214s as proof of service. If you have received your estimated earnings statement back from your Military Finance Center, just review it again, ensure the date range matches. It matches your application and it matches your DD 214 or whatever other proof of service documentation that you have, that the dates match. If you do not have your estimated earnings statement, you will need to submit your application to that Military Finance Center that's applicable to you, and wait until you receive the statement prior to sending your package to the Civilian Benefits Center. Um, the request for estimated earnings applications, this can take up to 60 days for the Military Finance Center to process. So please, keep that in mind as well. Okay. Once you have all of the contents of your military service deposit package and you've reviewed it for accuracy, the next step is to submit it to the Civilian Benefits Center. And you can do that a few ways. You can send it through fax, and we have the fax number there, 757-396-7826. You can actually mail it to OCHR Norfolk Operations Center, and attention it to the Civilian Benefits Center, and that's in Norfolk Naval Shipyard, Building 17, Portsmouth, Virginia. Or you can email it to the Navy Benefits email address. And we've started utilizing GRB as well, and people have been able to upload their documentation in GRB as well. Once your military service deposit package has been received by the CBC, you will receive an email confirming that we've received it. What will happen then is that we're going to verify the military deposit package is complete. We'll do that by reviewing your package, ensuring the applications are signed, the documents you provided are acceptable. If the application and documents are accurate, we will complete a service history and your package will then be certified. If not, then the CBC will reach out to you directly to address any incomplete or missing documents or items in the package if there is something missing. We do generate a military service deposit report, which provides you with an estimate of the deposit amount owed. Remember, this is just an estimate and the official amount will come from DFAS, but we will provide that with you. So at least you have an idea of what the deposit amount should be. We will notify you via email when your application has been certified and forwarded to DFAS for final processing. And the Civilian Benefits Center portion of the process is complete once the certified military service deposit package has been forwarded to DFAS. The CBC processing may take up to 120 days from the date the full and complete military service deposit package has been received. We do receive over 250 applications a month, so that is a lot of military deposits to process on top of the other things that we have going on as well. So that is why it can take up to 120 days. But typically, it doesn't take that long. We strive to make it as fast as possible, um, but just be aware of those time frames. Okay. And as I discussed earlier, this is an example of what the military service deposit report would look like, and this is what we would attach to the email to you, showing, okay, this is an estimate of the deposit amount, and if there is any interest accrued at that time, like an estimate of how much that would be, and then the total amount. So it does break it down a bit to show you how much potentially would be owed for the military deposit. Um, and then if you look at the very bottom of the screen, it will also show you when your next interest accrual date will be. So again, that interest does accrue annually. So it'll let you know when the next time that will interest will be added. Okay. And again, we'll take a quick 2-minute break for the moderators to continue answering any questions in the chat. Okay, welcome back. So now what happens once the Civilian Benefits Center has certified your application and submitted it to DFAS for processing? DFAS, their processing time is around 30 business days. So that is about 6 weeks. Um, Once DFAS has processed your request, they will mail to your residence an official payment letter. We saw an example of that, I believe. Please be mindful that your address is accurate and up to date in MyPay, because that's the address that they're going to use. The DFAS payment letter will provide you with instructions for payment. It will give you the official deposit amount, the service period, and the amount of service time covered by the deposit. It'll also provide you methods of payment, and Block 20 of your LES will now reflect either the amount owed or the paid in full amount after you've paid it, whichever is applicable. So be on the lookout of your LES when you see that number come into Block 20. Okay, and here is actually the example of the DFAS payment letter that will be mailed to your home that provides all of that information that we previously discussed. It'll give you the amount owed, and again, it'll provide you with ways that you can make your payments. You can set up an allotment, you can pay online, you can send a check. So there are, several options of payment methods. Okay. So if you decide to pay the deposit, please be aware, military service deposits are voluntary. You can complete the military service deposit process. We can certify it, send it to DFAS. DFAS can send you the payment letter, but it's still a voluntary decision for you. You are not required at any time to actually go through and complete the military deposit if you change your mind. Okay. Military service deposits are not debts. That is just them providing you information as far as how much your deposit will be. Deposits may be made at the time of retirement, must be paid in a lump sum. If you are going to do the military deposit, it has to be paid in full prior to you retiring. Okay. After making payments, if you decide you no longer want to pay for the deposit, you'll be unable to receive a refund until after you retire. So be mindful of that as well. Once you have paid the deposit in full, please be advised DFAS will mail you a paid in full letter. Once that deposit is complete, you'll need to provide a proof of payment to the Civilian Benefit Center for retirement purposes. And you can fax a copy of your paid in full letter to the benefits line. Um, Make sure that you keep a copy for your record. And you can have your HR, or you can contact the benefits line. Also, make sure it's uploaded. That paid in full letter can be uploaded into your EOPF, so that way it's there as documentation that you have paid it. When you go to do your retirement, it's included into your calculations for your pension. If you do not receive a paid in full letter from DFAS, you can fax a request for the paid in full letter at DFAS Imaging at 1-866-401-5849. And you can also contact the benefits line for assistance if you've paid it and you have not received that paid in full letter. Okay. And this is just an example of what a paid in full letter will look like. And again, I would have that request to have that uploaded into my EOPF. Definitely keep a copy of this in your personal records that you will be able to access once you're getting close to your retirement time. It's very important to keep a copy for yourself. And again, we will take a very brief break for any questions to be answered in the chat or to allow you time to get up and stretch your legs. Welcome back, and we will um, go ahead and pretty much finish up the presentation. And remember that you can still put questions in the chat, and there will be opportunity at the end of the presentation to continue to put questions in the chat if there is something that has not been covered yet that you still have questions about. Okay, so these are just the frequently asked questions that we get from employees regarding their military service deposit. Okay. How long does it take before my application is sent to DFAS for processing? Again, it takes our metrics for doing that is 120 days upon receipt of a complete and accurate package. Those are the key words there, because if we get an incomplete package and we're going back and forth with you to get the information that we need, that 120 days starts counting once we receive the complete package. Again, we do strive to make sure that it's done, if possible, faster than 120 days. But sometimes there are things that are out of our control. But typically, we do try to make sure that it happens a little bit faster than that. Can I buy back my military time if I am an inactive civil service employee? No, this is only for active civil service employees. Um, so if you've separated, you will not be able to buy back your military time while you're separated. Can I buy back military periods of military service if they are not consecutive? Yes, and if they're not consecutive, you can pick and choose which ones you want to buy back if you don't want to buy back all of them. Remember, when there are consecutive DD-214s with no break in service, that's where you have to buy back both periods. Okay. When should I submit my military deposit application? The sooner, the better to avoid interest. I love saving money, so I definitely recommend sooner, as soon as you can, if you've decided that you do want to buy back that military time. Okay. Am I eligible to buy back military service after I have retired from civil service? No, you have to buy your military service back prior to retirement. And one thing I do want to touch on, some people want to buy back their military. They want to buy back their military time, complete their military deposit, and they want to retire in a month. It's going to take longer than a month to process that military deposit because not only on our end are we processing it, but then we are submitting it to DFAS and they have to process it as well. So I have seen situations where people have had to push out their retirement so that they can get their military deposit processed prior to their retirement. So that's another incentive to go ahead and get it taken care of as soon as possible as well. Okay. How long does it take DFAS to send me my payment letter so that I can pay my deposit? DFAS is the standard processing time is 30 days and approximately 15 additional days for mailing time via US mail. So I would give it, 6 weeks or so. When I buy back my military time, does it change my leave SCD? No, buying back military time does not change your leave SCD. If you believe that the leave SCD is incorrect, you need to contact your local HR office to request them to review that. Okay. Do I pay interest on my military deposit if I don't pay it in full? Yes, you pay interest on your military deposit if it's 3 years after your first covered appointment with the federal service. So interest will continue to accrue until that deposit has been paid in full. And this is another breakdown of just the military service deposit report, which is that estimate that we provide to you once we've processed your military deposit. And here it's showing the 3 years after your first covered appointment. That will be your interest accrual date, and that's the annual date that your interest will accrue until it is paid in full. And at the bottom of that page, as I mentioned earlier, it shows you when your next interest accrual date will come up if it's not paid in full. And it'll give you the breakdown of the deposit amount with or without interest, depending on your situation. It'll show your first covered federal appointment, and it'll show your military dates as well. There are resources that you are able to utilize if you want to research additional information. And also, the easiest thing to do is honestly contact the benefits line if you have questions regarding your military deposit. Either they will be able to answer your questions, or like I said, they will create a ticket and a technician will be able to provide you forms, applications, and answer all of your questions regarding the military deposit process that you may have. The phone number for the benefits line is 888-320-2917. You can reach them through email as well. And they are Monday through Friday from 7:30 a.m. through 7:30 p.m. and this is Eastern Standard Time. The fax number for the Civilian Benefits Center is 757-396-7826. And again, you can fax your military service deposit package to the Civilian Benefits Center if you are ready for it to be processed. You can also upload it into GRB or provide it to the benefits line. There is a portal for OCHR, which is the Office of Civilian Human Resources, on the screen. Please be sure that when you go into the portal that you do use your email certificate on your CAC when prompted. DFAS customer service phone number, 1-800-729-3277. And then the DFAS imaging fax number is 866-401-3999. 5849. And again, that would be where you could contact DFAS to request that paid in full letter if you paid your military deposit in full and you still haven't received the letter in the mail. Okay. That is ends the presentation, but the chat will be open for any questions that are still need to be answered if anyone has any. Okay, thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate you guys and hope that you are able to decide soon if you are willing or wanting to make a military service deposit. Thank you.